Hi and welcome to today's Talk Time. I'm Meredith McCarthy, your host, and we've got Peter McLaughlin, who is a hypnotherapist, and it's going to be a really interesting journey to unpack what he does. Now, during the journey, he's going to talk a little bit about regression and also past lives, also about, I guess, the nature of reality and how we construct things in our mind and how we as hypnotherapists help people to heal often. Now, it's not saying that hypnotherapy heals all. Okay, so just a disclaimer there. But it's really about honoring his journey of how he got into hypnotherapy to begin with and what's happened since. So buckle up. I hope you enjoy this one. Peter McLaughlin, welcome to the NZACH Talk Time podcast. I'm really excited actually to talk to you because you're a fellow hypnotherapist and your journey to get into this was quite interesting. So do you want to share with the audience a little bit more about what got you into hypnotherapy to begin with?
Okay, so in 2003, in the wake of 9/11, I was volunteering to be a firefighter in the town that I lived in Connecticut. And I had to take an extensive physical. And the first part of the physical was the physical part of the physical. And the doctor said, wow, you're in great shape for your age. At the time, I was 41. Come back and give blood. I gave blood. And then all these alarm bells went off. I had all these messages. And when I got in touch with the doctor's office, I could tell the person I was talking to was kind of amped up. And they said, we think that you have Lyme disease and a rare form of leukemia. And I went into denial. I demanded that they do the test again. They did the test again, and they came back with the exact same results. And so this started me on an odyssey of trying to understand what was causing this condition. I had 3 little kids. I didn't want to die. When I asked them how long I had, they said maybe 10 years. And the more that I studied this condition, and in fact, all conditions, the more I realized how much power the mind has over the body. And without belaboring it, it led me eventually to thinking, oh, I want to learn how to control my mind so I can control my body, so I can maximize my lifespan. And that's what led me to being a hypnotherapist.
Yeah, it is incredible how the mind-body connection works. And I think over the years, I've seen that time again, where you shift mind, body follows, but often the body is an alarm system for something that we might need to process or work on. And getting to the root cause is something that you are strongly kind of doing in your practice. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you work with clients to get to that root cause?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I would say is just put it in context of there's something wrong with your car. You know, it's pulling to the right, it's making a weird noise, there's smoke coming out of the engine. And if you took that car into a mechanic and they said, oh, just turn up the radio so you don't hear the weird noise, we're going to install a fan to blow away the smoke so that you can drive down the road without the smoke obscuring your vision, you'd laugh at that person and take the car to somebody else. Because it seems to me that no problem occurs in a vacuum. Every problem has a root cause, and that if you don't deal with the root cause, you're just kind of papering it over. So it has never made any sense to me to do anything other than help clients find the root cause and do the bulk of the work there.
This is something that I drill into my students actually is the power of regression and getting to that part and resolving it in some way. And I think many hypnotherapists do work in different ways around regression and how they might treat one client over another. And a lot of also I see hypnotherapists out there who are very script bound. And it's that disconnection from the client sitting in front of you and really being in the moment. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Very strong. Like I'm sure you've heard this term too, scriptnosis. I just can't get behind that at all. I mean, I was an actor for many, many years in New York City, professional actor. And I was away from it for 22 years. And actually, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but I'll just say there was an armed bank robbery. And this was involved with me getting back on stage doing Shakespeare after 22 years. And what I can say to you for sure is that the script is valuable, but you have to know it well enough that you can let it go, that you don't have to use, because as soon as you do that, your attention is being pulled from the client to the script, client to the script, client to the script. And I think we lose the plot in the same way an actor would lose it if they were trying to perform a part and they're looking down at their script and back up at the other actors, back up at the other actors. It takes you out, even if for just a few moments. Yeah. And you have to make it yours, is my opinion. And I don't usually speak in such definitive terms, but I feel so strongly about this, not just from the perspective of a hypnotherapist, but also from the perspective of an actor. And that it takes more work if you're going to use a script to become familiar with it, but then have the confidence in yourself that you can put that to the side. Because I think that's what happens a lot of times, is I think people use them because they feel like they don't have what it takes. And they think somebody else knows better. And I think it's easy to get absorbed in the specific technical details of, oh, first we're going to do this part, and then we're going to touch on identity, and then we're going to touch on this and that and the other thing, as opposed to really being connected with that person and trusting that you're going to deliver the right thing at the right time if you're totally connected to them.
Absolutely. It is fascinating when I'm observing my students really go off script, and they're nervous, but when they start paying attention authentically, things start to click into place and the client has the answer. And it's trusting that process, that if you know how to ask the right question, the client's going to deliver the answer. And the client has known that all along. They just didn't realize they did. So I want to get into, I guess, the idea of regression. And you work with regression quite a lot. Mm-hmm. Do you want to share a little bit about your methodology and kind of why you think that that's maybe a useful a useful technique or way of getting into the root cause for people?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I would first say that to me, it's like talking about a coin, and that there are obviously two sides to the coin. One side of the coin is, let's say, the obstacle. What has been preventing the client from living the kind of life that they want to live? What has been causing them to repeat negative patterns over and over again? The second part of the coin would be, let's say, the positive programming. That's where I see the hypnotic suggestion. And I believe that it's the obstacle part that makes it the hardest for the client to achieve their hopes, wishes, and dreams. And we both know as hypnotherapists that the most powerful emotion wins. We both know that the role of the subconscious mind is to protect the person. And so if they want to lose weight, and you're just working on the side of the coin that is the positive programming about their eating habits and about speeding up their metabolic rate and about dropping the weight, and they feel satisfied with 2/3 of the food that they used to have, but you don't address the obstacle side, which could be that they were sexually abused as a child and their subconscious is creating this layer almost like armor to protect them, or the extra weight allows them to feel like they fit into their family group or their group of friends. And you only work on this other side, the most powerful emotion to me is always going to win. So, and if you asked me, and you're not, but if you asked me to say, how would you do like a 50-50 percentage between the positive program, the suggestions, and the obstacle? I would say no. I would say it's more like 75-25 or 80-20, with 75 to 80% of my attention being on, let's resolve the obstacles. What's preventing this person from truly moving through this? And then let's support it over here with some positive programming. And P.S., my personal view, and this is probably heretical, is that you can record things that people can listen to. It could either be custom or it may even be generic. And I know this because I've got a YouTube channel with 130,000 subscribers, and weight loss is a very popular topic there. And I know that people can access that and get a lot of benefit. I just want to make sure that I'm going to use another metaphor here. Sorry to mix them, but you've got this beautiful sailing ship, and I see that that's what we are as humans. We are these magnificent creatures, these designed by God with this impeccable engineering, and that it's this beautiful wooden sailing ship, and it's got 4 masts and all of these sails. And if everything is deployed, you would expect to sail across the ocean beautifully. But the problem is that the anchor is deployed and it's dragging across the seabed. And that's what's preventing this ship from sailing the way it was designed to sail. That's how I see my clients. That's how I see myself and all of humanity, honestly.
I wanted to talk to something that you just mentioned earlier. And as a teaching note, a lot of times the rookie mistake that therapists make is assuming what the problem is for the client. Mm-hmm. And so you might, be talking, the root cause could be this, this, and this. The only person that can qualify whether that is true is the client. And that's where that method of taking a moment to unpack the client successfully, help them to join their dots. This is really, really important. Otherwise, if we project our own assumptions on that client, we are in risk of losing rapport, and also the client becoming, I guess, disconnected from the whole process. That they're really just going and being compliant nicely and politely, and you never see them again. It is important that people realize that the work that we're doing, it's not based on assumptions, it's based on curiosity, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if someone comes to me and they say that they want to lose weight, for example, we know what the goal is. The next question is why? Mm-hmm. Why is that an important goal to you? The next question is, how long have you been trying to do this? What have you tried? Has anything worked partially or temporarily? Has anything not worked? Maybe a little bit about the history of their childhood, other things that are going on. And then the next question is, okay, so what's the root cause of this? Now, I would say the client might not know. Because as we know as hypnotherapists, there's often, especially with problem areas, a disconnection between what the conscious mind desires and what it thinks and what it assumes versus what the subconscious mind, how it's operating. And this is the reason for the problem in the first place.
Yeah.
I was saying on a podcast the other day that if you imagine one of us as a human being riding on top of an elephant, that's like your conscious mind with the subconscious. And everything's great if the elephant is happy going in the direction you want to go. But as soon as you want to go in a direction and the elephant's like, no, I'm not going there. Now you got a problem. And I can't tell you how many times working with clients that we've run into a situation whereby the client thought for sure they had resolved this particular issue in the past, and it turned out they hadn't. Or it turned out to be an issue they hadn't even consciously remembered at the time.
Yeah.
So so my argument would be, usually, often, neither one of you knows when you sit down together and start talking.
Yeah, good awareness. And this is where I think the subconscious work is so important. And that's where hypnotherapy truly does shine as a modality to get to that root cause, because it helps to connect to that subconscious part and give it a voice. One of the things that you do is past life regression in the way of spontaneously, people will go back to the root cause and it may not be in this lifetime. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Sure. The quantum reality we now know is that time is an illusion. And when I say we now know, I'm basically saying that science is validating what the ancients, I think, already knew, what the mystics already knew. And I find this fascinating because that's also the reality of the subconscious mind, is that there's no time. And we know this because when you're in love and you're sitting with your beloved and the sun starts to go down and you're like, wait a second, how long has it been? It's been 4 hours. It feels like it's been 20 minutes. Or you're completely immersed in a movie and the movie ends and you feel like it was 20 or 30 minutes. So because the quantum reality, because the subconscious reality is there is no time, it's irrelevant to your subconscious mind whether something happened in a past lifetime or it happened earlier in this life. As long as it's treating it as a clear and present danger, when you get triggered, that'll put you into a fight or flight response. And therefore, it has to be resolved, in my view, irrespective of where we say it is, whether it's a past life or it's earlier in this lifetime.
Absolutely. A lot of people don't believe in past lives, but there are some things that happen in a client session which is quite spectacular in the way of the kind of knowledge that gets pushed forward, which is not in keeping with that person's maybe paradigm or understanding of this lifetime. And it can be quite interesting to observe that wisdom, that connection occurring. And it can be quite curious for the client to even experience that too, because often they're not thinking it's a past life. So they, yeah. What's your take on that?
Well, most of the people who come to me are coming to me as a referral, or they've been following me on YouTube, or they've seen me on a podcast, or a friend told them to come. They're usually people who have tried and exhausted a number of other avenues. And I think that that's actually a kind of a good thing, because generally speaking, their mind is a little bit more open than it may have been when they first discovered they had an issue and started walking down that road. And I also will say to people that are skeptical, look, I don't have a dog in this fight as to whether you believe that past lifetimes are truly real or they're not. If you want to decide that it's a metaphor that your mind made up and you reach the goal that you're telling me you want to reach, then everybody wins. Who cares? Mm-hmm. And it's not for me anyway to tell you that they're real or they're not real. Why don't you have the experience and then you decide what it means?
Yeah. A lot of times that is a healthy way of looking at therapy, is regardless of whether it's a false memory, even if that is what the client subconscious has dished up and it makes sense for them and it helps them to resolve whatever it is. We're not here to say whether it was fact or fiction. And I think that's important to kind of look at it like that. Mm-hmm. The metaphor of the mind, it's sort of giving the client something that it can process in a way that feels like a connection to whatever has been going on, trauma or otherwise. And we know even in this lifetime how we produce false memory. So who's to say what's really real anyway? Most of it's constructed, distorted, deleted, and generalized, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are different levels of what we call reality. Now, I think when you watch a movie and you cry and your palms sweat and your heartbeat is elevated, I think all of these responses are clearly, anybody would say that's real. Those are real physiological responses. And then my next thing is, well, how can you have a real physiological response to something that's fake? And my answer is because it's not fake. But it doesn't fit within our neat, tiny little box of what reality is. It's a larger version of reality. And I think the more that we accept these things, the easier it is to understand, the easier it is to move through. And we're living at a time when we have something like the placebo effect that every hypnotist knows about. And it just sits over there on a shelf. Everybody knows that it's real. It could be 33% of the effectiveness of any pharmaceutical. We know that sham knee surgery is just as effective as the real thing, but it still sits over there uneasily on a shelf because it doesn't fit into this little box of reality. We have something called the uncertainty principle, where a particle behaves differently if a human being is observing it versus if a human being's not observing it. Like, that doesn't fit into this little box either. And I think it's important for us to open our minds, to recognize that we're just as in the dark as people who lived 1,000 years ago in the dark ages. We don't know that much more than them in a relative sense. Yeah. You know, when you look into, there's a phrase, seeing is believing. And if I asked you or other people who haven't looked into this, what percentage of the light spectrum do you reckon is visible light that you can access with your eyeballs? Well, the answer is 0.0035. We are totally blind when it comes to the light spectrum, but we think that we see everything. So I do think it's important for us to, yes, be skeptical, but also open the mind, recognize that we only understand an infinitesimal fraction of reality, that our bodies are subject, they're so sensitive to our emotional state, to the stories we tell ourselves, to the programming we received as children, and yes, to things like past lifetimes, which again, to the subconscious mind is irrelevant whether it happened 10 years ago, 40 years ago, or 400 years ago. And I don't know for sure whether each one of these is a bona fide, you could do research and find that, yes, there was a person of that name and that lived that lifetime, or if it's somehow passed through the DNA, or if it's a combination of these things. Because science has also validated that you can, and I don't know who does this work, but traumatize a mouse. And every time you shock it, you expose it, let's just say, to the smell of lavender. And then that mouse has a child mouse, and the child mouse has a grandchild mouse, and you expose the grandchild mouse to lavender, and it acts like it's been shocked. Like, that's kind of like a past lifetime in a way. That the trauma.
They did that to monkeys too. They had a banana. They had these bananas at the top of a ladder, and it would shock them when they would go up. So the next generation learned never to go with the bananas at the top of the ladder.
Okay, so whatever you call it, if you can help people resolve this, that's a net win.
Absolutely. I think too, each generation has an opportunity often to resolve the past trauma DNA sequence, if you like. And sometimes, you know, you do see children born into the world and they clearly are quite wired differently to their sibling. And yet they're in this sort of safe space and so on, but they're really amped up anxiety babies, you know, and you think, woof, what happened there? Whereas the other ones chilled as, and you think, okay, they're quite different. And this is the expression of genes, but it could also be echoes of past. We don't know. Some people have extreme phobia around water for no real reason, or they feel tremendous phobias around knives or other things. So you never do know what has gone on. And I think as hypnotherapists, we need to kind of continue to stay open-minded and just work with whatever presents itself.
Oh, certainly. Absolutely. And without a doubt. And it also is so compelling that you have these cases of 4-year-old children who've never been exposed to history books or movies that, you know, in the case of this one kid, he started reporting to his parents that he was shot down in World War II, that he flew an F-4U Corsair, that the name of his wingman was Jack something or other, that the name of the obscure baby flat top carrier he flew off of was, I'm making it up, the Ticonderoga or something. And the name of the island was Iwo Jima. And he got hit by an anti-aircraft artillery shell in the engine cowling. And the name of his sister is such and such at 4. And all the details, all of them were validated. How is that possible?
There's case after case of that, which is fascinating to me. I had a recent experience with my mum. She nearly died. She's really interesting because for the first time started to get visits, and she'd tell them to fuck off, actually.
Oh, wow.
But she'd be visited by spirit, and she thought they were kind of like, why are all these people around me? What's going on? Yeah. Now she's actually starting to feel better, and they've all gone. But she would be sitting in the hospital going, oh, there's a tall figure just to the left of you, really like not standing on the floor, but just kind of above you a bit. And I'm like, okay. And she had a really tragic journey. She lost one of her sons, and she also had 7 miscarriages.
Oh my God.
And so she had a lot of grief going on. And during that time in the hospital, it was a really big healing journey for her. And she was scared about dying as well, because she thought, well, that's it. There can't be a God, because why would God do something so cruel to take away my son and, give me this life and so on. So there was a lot of unfinished business. And during that journey that I had with her, it was a real privilege to be able to share what I have viewed and where I come from and the kind of work I do. And she got to listen to some hypnotherapy journeys actually for the first time. And she's resolved a lot, which is fascinating. So her ability to sort of suddenly say, I love you, Meredith, or just acknowledge and be in a much more peaceful and resourceful place, it's incredible. And I know I'm sharing my mother's journey very publicly now, but I think it's important sometimes we leak these things, because there may be someone out there listening to this who has been suffering for such a long time. And I promise you don't have to suffer all your life. If you've had big stuff happen, hypnotherapy and closure work is really, really something that I can't, I guess, highlight more in the way of the importance, because there is opportunities to check in with someone who can really support you to create these healing moments, and that person changes after that. They don't just regress back to how they were before. No, that they upgrade, and that's the work we do, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's true. And I'm thinking about grief. Working with people who are suffering as a result of losing somebody really close to them. And I've worked with women who've lost children, and with husbands who've lost wives, and then also there's a massive community of people out there. Anybody who's ever owned a dog, when a dog dies, there's so many people wandering around in such a state of agony. Part of it is just due to the nature that they don't live that long. 14 years or something. And I suppose if you're lucky. And that we're the ones that are called upon to say to the vet, yes, it's okay to euthanize this dog now. And no matter how clear the situation is, many of us still hold this dual thought, this like, yes, it was time, there was no other choice, but then this, oh, I gave the go-ahead to terminate the life of this creature that I adored so much. And not only are they not here anymore, but I feel this weighty sense of responsibility, a guilt, did I do the right thing or whatever? And in my experience, the solution, the way you turn an open wound of grief that could be a month old, it could be decades old, it could be from a past life, into a scar, is that in hypnosis, you reunite them, you bring them back together where the client can actually speak in their consciousness to this dog or to this person and receive, almost like the client becomes the psychic. That is what I have found, where they can say, I'm sorry, was I a good enough dog owner? Did I make a mistake? I'm so sorry that we didn't resolve this thing that we had between us before you died. And then to hear from this loved one, I don't blame you, I love you, all these other things, I'm safe, I'm okay, is the way, again, I have found that open wound turns into a scar, and people are able to heal these otherwise intractable sources of pain.
Absolutely. I had a woman who came to me many years ago, and she was in the hospice with her husband, and he was going to die, and she didn't want to fall asleep if he passed away, and she wanted to stay awake to be there in that moment. And what happened was every time she was just about to go to sleep, she'd wake herself up. Now, when he did pass, she had this terrible insomnia. So every time she went into a light sleep, she would jolt herself awake. So she wasn't able to drive a car anymore. She wasn't able to work anymore because she was sleep deprived. Mm-hmm. So this is 3 years in to the grieving, right?
Yep.
And she came in desperate. I said, okay. So we regressed her to a place that they used to go fishing together. Mm-hmm. And she got to have a chat with him.
Yes.
And then she fell asleep. And I left her there in the chair for a bit. I thought, right, she obviously needs it. And that night she had a full night's sleep. It just recalibrated. It was that closure that she needed, whatever that was. I have no idea what she even said to him. But it's just, again, doing that work, holding that space and letting that person process it in whatever way they need to. And it wasn't until after that she shared what she had sort of done. So a lot of it is very private work in regression, a lot of it not, like you are actually actively talking back and forward. But for some therapy sessions, it's actually just trusting that the client has gone to that place and nodding their head when they're there and saying whatever they need to, taking as long as you need. And once you've done that, just nod your head. And is it okay to da-da-da today? Yes, okay, well, when you're ready, just do that and nod your head when you're done. And it's just those permissions, that holding space, allowing that client to do whatever it is that it kind of they feel moved to do in that moment. It's very, very life-changing, really.
I would agree with you. Yeah, it is. It's transformative. It's often, as you pointed out before, something that the client hasn't ever experienced before. They may never have even considered it before. And I agree with you that you can't have an experience like that and not be permanently changed. Consciousness once raised can never be lowered. And having these transformative connections is, the words almost start to fail. I had, coincidentally, both on Friday and Saturday of last week, 2 different clients unrelated to each other, both said almost the same thing to me. A woman on Friday said, I couldn't even tell you when I left here the last time, but when I hugged Jesus, it was so moving. It was so powerful to me that I had no words to describe it. And I thought about it all week. And I just now can actually tell you how much this means to me and how much it means to my faith. And then the guy came in, another client on Saturday, totally unrelated to this woman on Friday, this physician. And he said, I've always considered myself a Christian. I've always gone to church and all these other things. But I just want you to know that since we've started working, I have a completely different connection to faith because I'm having the experiences. And I have believed for quite some time that perhaps that's really the meaning of faith, which is you have your own internal experience and your own consciousness. It doesn't conform to one of your 5 senses. So the faith is actually trusting that even though it didn't conform to one of your 5 physical senses, even though someone else can't see it and validate it for you, that it is nonetheless real. Like these beings that came to your mom, that's an opportunity for her either to say, fuck off, get out of here, or, oh my God, the world is bigger than I thought it was. It's much bigger than I thought it was. And how blessed am I that I get to have this window into meeting my spirit guides.
It was fascinating just her trying to get her head around it, because it was beyond her capacity to understand what was going on, which is why she told them to fuck off, because she could not comprehend what it was. And it was a real privilege to be able to talk through that. And I said, well, next time they come visit, say hi from me. And just kind of normalize it for her. And I think it helped her not to fear what comes next. And for me, I think that was really important for her to experience. And for whatever reason, she's, a lot more buoyant, and, she's still in hospital care, will be. That's just where she's at. But, the shift in her is huge. And the thing is, when we're going through our own personal journeys, one of the things when my brother passed away, her son, he was 10, of cancer, and he used to come visit me. And when I was about 7, he came to me in dreams, said, "Oh, I have to stop visiting you. I can't come anymore." And I cried for days.
Wow.
But, for me as a child, my mum said, "Oh, yeah, you had an invisible friend." I'm like, well, hello. So when children see things, I had this beautiful boy actually the other day, and he had, I guess, tremendous anxiety at night, and he would see things. And I said to his mum, I wonder if he's sensing something. I didn't say that in his earshot, but I'm wondering if he's sensing something. And I said, my son used to see the green man, and my daughter used to see the pink lady, and they would come and support them. And apparently he also had a purple man. I thought that was interesting.
Yes.
And so she said, wow, okay. So I think when children are really young, they often do see things or sense things that adults don't.
I completely agree with you. And I would go a step further and say, based upon my experience working with clients over the last 20 years, that this is because our society systematically persuades us, maybe even propagandizes us, that we are much smaller than we are, that we are much less capable than we are. I mean, let's face it. One of the ways of controlling people is divide and conquer. The other way of controlling people is to have them in a state of fear. And if you knew, because you routinely met with Jesus, you met with your spirit guides, you met with your deceased relatives, you understood karma, you went into your past lifetimes, your fear of death wouldn't go away, but it wouldn't be nearly as significant as it is if you think, this is it, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I think in the play Hamlet,
on that note too, we become more opportunistic in this lifetime, because I think if you realize it's not an accident you're here.
No,
we're here for a reason. We're here to journey something. And if we can kind of do that, then that's a good journey for this life. Where I think if people don't have hope, or they don't have belief that there's any, like, this is all for nothing, that they get quite dark. I think that can really deaden a person's ability to lift themselves into finding meaning in some way. And I think people need a sense of connection, community, and meaning, to have that kind of liveliness that I'm looking forward to today. regardless of how challenging it might be. You see it differently. That optimistic lens is on. Whereas many people, they do suffer from anxiety and depression. They think, God, if this is all that life is, I want to get out of here. I can't do this anymore, assuming that that's it. But,
100%.
you're going to come back. Well, hello, you might be doing that all over again.
At the end of World War II, a conscious decision was made because the powers that be, at least in the United States, were looking around and saying, the economy's booming. Like we started from a depression, and then 5 years later, the economy was absolutely booming. And they were basically saying, well, how do we keep this going? And the answer was, we make consumption the new religion. And where I'm going with this is to piggyback on what you were talking about, that just because if you don't believe in something bigger than you, if you don't believe that your life has meaning, if you don't believe that you fit into a larger, beautiful tapestry or mosaic, then it really does feel like, what is it all worth? Once you've bought your third or fourth car, it's not as exciting anymore. Once you've been on X number of airplanes and traveled to X number of places, it's not as exciting anymore, or bought whatever other things that you can purchase in a consumer-oriented society. Once you face fear and you don't have a larger belief system, it's absolutely terrifying. So I completely agree with you that our whole existence hinges in some way upon having a larger belief system, that our lives have meaning, that this isn't the end, that our little, how much time we have here, my God, your brother only had 10 years. Most people are expecting at least 75 or 78 or 80 or whatever it is. And we really don't know how much time we have. But when you begin to understand, no, we live in a free will universe. We chose to come here. We even chose the hardships. Why would somebody do that? Well, what if you parachuted in from some other civilization and you watched Navy SEALs training? You'd think they were being tortured. This must be some kind of a punishment. No, they chose to be there. Why would anybody choose to do this? That is a really good example.
That is a really good example.
Right?
Because I do believe we need contrast to understand the difference. And in our physical self, in our physical body, we can experience that viscerally, like really in another level that you can't if you're in a spiritual plane, if you like, without a body. So this spacesuit that we have for a period of time helps us to experience all of those things. And the limitations as well that comes with it too, because there's a reason often why we have amnesia, that we don't remember the past lives, because if we came in always remembering past lives, we wouldn't get on with this one,
That may be true. It also may be true that because we are born into this particular culture at this particular time, and it's openly hostile to that concept, that because we want to fit in, and parents might say to us, well-meaning parents might say, oh, that's just a dream. That's all in your head. It's only your imagination. That's not really possible. It's like, oh, okay, well, I want to fit in with my parents. I don't want to be considered a kook, so I'm not going to talk about this. You see what I mean? That's the other possibility, because any one of us can remember it like this. You don't even necessarily need a hypnotist sitting there with you. You might be doing a plant medicine thing, or maybe you're having a dream at night, or maybe you're having a fever, or maybe you're just sitting there and somebody's playing a crystal bowl and you entrain with this, And the other thing I wanted to say, Meredith, that what you were talking about sparked in me is that we are drawn to drama. So one day I was, and this came from I don't even know what to call it anymore. I don't know what to call it, self-hypnosis or meditation. I don't even know. So I'm in my meditation every day, meeting with my spirit guides, and I'm particularly upset about what's happening in the world. This is maybe like, 6 or 7 years ago. And I said to them in meditation, why is this place such a shithole? And I was talking about all the violence or whatever else. And they immediately answered me and they said, you chose to come here, number one. And number two, they said, when you choose to entertain yourself, You pay money. You stand in lines to watch movies and read books and TV shows about what? Conflict. So don't come and complain to us about what this world is. This is what you signed up for. And as you said, this is how we learn. And every one of us is saying, oh, yeah, the world is so horrible. Let me watch another episode of Peaky Blinders.
I saw that the other day. So, when we think about conflict, absolutely, it does spark interest, doesn't it? And this is where we do our most growing, I do believe. So the bigger the challenge, the more we upgrade, the more we join the dots, the more we have levels of gratitude that we wouldn't be able to entertain if we didn't have loss. There's these very important opposites that we need to experience, and not the positive is not the only reality. We need to have that negative as a contrast for understanding. And so that rainbow of emotion is extremely important for every human to experience. Yes. Also, the eclectic range of humans, like we're meant to be different, and that equals levels of conflict, because there's always going to be some level of misunderstanding because we're so different. We're coming from different places.
I've come to say that the conflict that we have in this life, especially in relationships, is not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah.
So in relationships, whether it's with your husband or your wife, or it's with one of your children or a parent or something, I think the idea is, I love this person so much that I'm not willing to just say, fuck off. It's you're the reason that I'm miserable. I'm going to replace you with somebody else. But the idea is that I love you so much. I don't want to lose you. I'm willing to actually look inside myself and say, what am I contributing to this conflict? How do I need to change in order to bring more harmony here? I think that's the purpose. And that the moment that we just say, well, it's all you, you're a malignant narcissist, you're the reason for all of my suffering. I've made myself the victim, and I've lost an opportunity to look inside and change something about me, because I just don't buy that one person is all good and the other person is all bad. I believe that both people bring their own crap to the table, and it comes out, especially in an intimate relationship. And that we're being called upon, because of our love for the other, to look inside and say, what can I do? How can I change as a human being? How is this pain calling upon me to change?
I often say to people, clients specifically, we don't have remote control over others, but absolutely we can control how we turn up next. And that's where the question is, how do you want to turn up? Because if you're done doing it the old way, well, something has to shift in you. You cannot expect the other person to be the one doing all the change. There's a two-way thing, and we teach people how to treat us. So they're mirroring back often what we bring. So that's where it feeds that cycle. If we stop feeding it, it can't exist. It just collapses. So if someone keeps on bullying you, but you choose not to be bullied, well, it doesn't go anywhere. It falls flat. And so if we kind of hold our own, and we're realizing, the story that we are telling ourselves, our identity story, I am this, I am that. You're all sorts of things that you think you are, but none of them as well. Like you're just pure potential is what you are. You're not really your identity that you think you are. They're just experiences that you're having so far. And we can change how we view it. We can change how we turn up to it. It's quite fascinating. And when we shift something like a perspective and we look back at that memory, it changes its energy connection immediately.
Yep. I agree with that completely. Well-meaning people have been saying from time immemorial that you can't change the past. There's nothing you can do about it. You just have to move forward. And my response to that is, you are the past. In other words, you are the filter through which you experience the present is completely formed and shaped by the things that have happened to you in the past, most specifically what you said, which is my perspective of what's happened. And because we established already that past, present, and future to the subconscious is now.
Yes.
Which is the quantum reality.
Yeah.
So by that measurement, you can affect the past, because the past isn't the past is now. And what specifically we mean, what you're saying and what I'm saying, is you change your perspective on what it means. You see it from a different vantage point. And because of that, the story shifts. If that woman hadn't cheated on me and dumped me and left me for someone else and left me heartbroken and in a state of grief and feeling like I was no good, then I wouldn't have, gone into therapy. I wouldn't have changed my life in a certain way. And I wouldn't have met the love of my life, with whom I now have these 3 beautiful children, right? That's a shift in the story that happens as the story progresses, which again is like drama. We're following the protagonist as everything is shifting and changing, right?
Yeah.
And your outcome, as you were saying before, is going to be shaped largely by how you interpret the things that have happened. Were you a victim, or did it actually help you in some way on your path? Did it make you stronger? Did it make you more compassionate? Did it open your mind? Did it induce you to seek help when before you always turned people away?
Absolutely. I often introduce the idea of the hero's journey, and that we are all on this sort of journey of discovery, and we get to the other side, if we want to, being a hero of that, surviving and learning and growing from all of those tests that we get to experience. And that's what really is the juice of life. We're here to experience everything. Yeah. And on a universal level, there isn't a thing called right, wrong, good, bad. This is a construct from a human lens, if you like. But if you look at nature, nature shows things like a spider mating with another spider and then immediately getting eaten. Well, it sacrifices its own life to bring the next generation in. We see these patterns in people as well, where they sacrifice, but for greater good, for some reason, like they've got some purpose, some mission, whatever it is. And so it's quite interesting. Nature, if we observe it, is often an echo of all of the things that are going on with us. Which we can learn a lot from that, can't we?
Yes, those are words of wisdom for sure. And it also brings us back to the concept of past lifetimes, that it's been observed for hundreds of years by very learned people that nature renews itself. That in the Northern Hemisphere with the seasons, it looks like everything's dead in the fall. Everything looks like it's dying in the fall. And in the winter, everything looks dead. That's it. All the leaves are gone. The trees are bare. The grass is dead or dormant. Everything's gone. And then lo and behold, in the spring, what happens? Everything magically, it feels like magic. How do those leaves grow back on the trees? It's amazing that life renews itself. Why wouldn't we? Even physics says a thing, that energy is neither created nor is it destroyed. It only changes its shape or its form. So we see this in nature, the renewal of things. Why wouldn't we renew as well? Our energy, our essence, not the physical body, but the essence.
Even your body language is showing a Taurus. And if anyone wants to look into that, please do. But a tree, the tree of life, for example, and that losing the leaves and the leaves coming to the earth and it being reabsorbed and so on. If you look at the earth and we think about north, south poles and other things, and it's this energy and it's continuous. It doesn't stop. This is the nature of energy and the reality itself. We are in this continuous perpetual renewal cycle. death and birth, and that why wouldn't we be doing that too?
Exactly.
Yeah, we're part of it. It's been wonderful talking to you, Peter. It really has been.
You too,
It's good to spark stuff that floats my boat anyway. I'm a bit of a geek in this space, which is why I have the channel. And it's nice to be able to bring someone on that speaks the same language. It's good.
Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. Really, really thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. So I'll have a link below if you want to check out more about Peter and what he does. And thank you again, Peter, for your time today. I've really appreciated it. And I'll just like to say, when we're doing this work, I think it's a calling. I often say that. It's not just a job, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. Mm. Absolutely. I thought you first said cooling, COOLING.
The accent. Yeah, that calling. Right. And I think this is really important. There was a moment, a very pivotal moment in your journey that you had no idea you were going to do this as a career.
No.
And then suddenly, boom, your body did something really clever that switched that journey on. And this is the thing, you're still alive and well today, even though you, in a Western kind of model of health and longevity, that wasn't what they predicted for you.
No.
Yet here you are doing this work. And this is the thing, there's no mistakes, people out there listening. Listen to this, there's no mistakes. There's perfect timing and everything. And if we are curious enough to unpack what that is, exciting things come next. And so thank you, Peter, for waking up and doing this work with people and inspiring the world and sharing what you know. I really appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome. And thanks to you too, Meredith, for the work that you do and for this wonderful conversation today. And to all your listeners, hearty appreciation for all of you too for tuning in.
Cool. If you would like to do some training to become a clinical hypnotherapist, please visit the nzach.ac.nz site for more information. I'd love to be your guide.